Hey, Barry.
Hey, yo. Stacy's here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
It's 9 degrees here.
Balmy.
7 here, and it was like 4 at dawn this morning.
I'm going upstate. I told my friend, I don't know, it might be too cold where you are. It's 9 here.
Are you driving or are you going by other means?
What other means? No, I'm driving.
Train, friend?
No, driving. I am
It's not driving Miss Daisy, it's driving Mr. Marley.
Mr. So I've always been I always was a little bit judgmental when I saw people dress their dogs. Cause I like my dog to be sovereign and he doesn't like to wear clothes, but it's got so cold and he's getting older that I broke down and I bought him what I thought was a really nice coat. And I wasn't looking for looks. I was looking, it's so soft. And actually he loves that feel. It's that like Sherpa material. So I did, and it's very easy with the Velcro, but he liked it. He likes the way it feels, but he can't walk down the steps and he feels nervous. So I wound up taking it off halfway in the walk and he was just jumping around like I'm free. He's very cute.
A straitjacket.
Did you get him snowshoes also?
No, he won't wear those.
Because some dogs do that, just to protect the feet from the cold.
No, I tried that because I wanted to protect his feet from the salt, when they put down the salt, but he really hates it. So I just wash his feet when we get home. He has a nice dog bath where he dips his paws in.
How biblical, washing your feet when you come into the tent.
My master. He is my master. Don't put that on a transcript. We want to keep it in context. This is a joke.
Speaking of that, let me see if I can turn on the live transcripting.
It's there. Well, I could see it's been enabled.
Testing. Am I seeing? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I can't see it, but that's because I don't want to, maybe. Let's see.
So I can see it now.
Maybe saved.
All right.
But I like that you could save it. That's a big deal.
Yep.
I was trying to describe that feature. I said that I knew that feature was there. I wasn't sure how to describe it though. Maybe save.
Just scroll back. The live transcript has real-time scroll back.
And it's got speaker identification, which is cool.
Oh, is that a new feature? Was that always there?
No.
I think that's new.
Yes, it's relatively new.
Oh, that's in the scroll back, not the real time.
Can you share your screen so I can see what you're looking at? Because I want to, I need to explain this to 2 separate people. How to.
I don't know that you can share the screen of Zoom itself.
Here's what I will do. I'll share a screenshot of what I'm seeing, okay?
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm putting it in the Facebook chat, okay?
Thank you. Yes, perfect for me. That's the best place.
Yeah, so if you look there, down at the bottom, there's a little subtitle.
Wait, I gotta get to it.
Closed caption. You see it? It says, how do I don't know that you can share the period?
Yes.
So that's an example of the live transcript working. Hey, Glenn.
But my question is, at the end of the call, how do you share that recording of the live transcript?
I can save the transcript and then just put it into the document that I prepare.
Okay, so the host has to enable the live transcript, and then at the end, they save the chat.
They save the live transcript, yes.
The voice to text is saved independently from the typed chat.
Yes, that's
You have the typed chat and the voice to text. They're different,
right.
clearly.
That's right. That's right.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Is it saved with the names of the people?
I actually don't know. We'll find out. Okay, who that?
Yes, I want to follow up on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it's saved with the name of the people, that's a
Right.
big deal.
I'll show you another screenshot that shows what I'm looking at. Okay, hang on one second. I'm gonna put it over there. Okay, here it is. Do you see it?
Where'd you put it?
Yep,
Oh.
it's there. So, oh, that's the
Yeah.
sidebar chat or something.
Do you see the transcript?
Yes. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, huh.
Okay, that's the live. It's even got the name in the
Okay.
picture. Wow.
That has the names.
Yeah,
That's great.
definitely
that's
has
great.
feature
Really great.
identification.
That's an
So-
improvement.
Yes. And because it's available right away, I don't have to wait until YouTube, does the automatic whatever it's called, description. Although, once YouTube does have it, I'll include it as well. And we'll see, if there's differences between the two. There will be, of course.
I think that YouTube, because it's not real time, it can do a better job of figuring out ambiguously spoken words.
Maybe, but having speaker identification is so useful, though.
Yeah, that especially if it sort of adapts to a speaker.
I don't know that it does. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if a speaker uses the same word more than once in a paragraph, I wonder if it realizes that they're all the same word as opposed to incorrectly transcribing each instance.
There. How are their
Do you
potatoes
need-
doing?
Do you need a paid account to be able to do that?
Yes.
Maybe. I am on a paid account, yes.
Okay.
I don't have a paid account and I don't have that option.
So did this come recently, or?
It's not like today, but it's been the last few months, I believe, yeah.
Wow.
Or at least it came to my attention just in the last several weeks.
And you have to subscribe to the third party that does it, which is free, but you have to subscribe to the third party and then link the two companies together to your account.
Right now, my Otter account is not linked with this. So if it's third party, it's probably not Otter.
Oh, they actually, because they bought Otter, that's why.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
they
heard something
acquired
about
Otter.
that.
So
Yeah.
so it's automatically linked because they bought Otter.
Okay.
That's right.
Initially,
somebody
it
say
was
that.
separate. On some systems, you have to link them.
Well, I'm still getting reminders to link them. So maybe I still have to do something.
I think if you use something like Microsoft Teams or some of these other systems, then they have to be linked separately as a third-party service.
Okay. Well, cool. Welcome, Colin. Welcome, Tace. Anyone care to check in? We've just been admiring this new feature of Zoom that I just activated.
I actually recently found out that I've been mirroring my video all along, and now it actually looks the way it looks here. So
Hold up your right hand, Glenn. Okay, there it is.
that's my right hand. Yeah.
Barry, come on, you're just confusing people.
But I'm trying
Then
to
you-
change my name back because I was on a Zoom call. I was they wanted me to say where I was from, so now it says Glenn, Norway. I don't know. But maybe I should change my name back. Doesn't really matter that much.
No, I think it's good to know you're from Norway. I think it's good to
Yeah.
be able to have an idea of where people are from. You know, I wouldn't put my
Oh, yeah.
address with my, you know, house number there, but
I could put my real name up, Barsum Torek, anthropologist from Mars.
And that's one of your imaginary characters.
Yeah, whenever
Let's go
I'm
with this
trying
more
to,
real than Barry.
whenever I do anthropology, sort of puzzling out, Earth culture, I pretend to be an anthropologist from Mars, observing Earth culture like an external scientist. And
That's very interesting. That's actually the plot of this book that I mentioned, the Beelzebub's Tales to its Grandson, is this perspective from Mars. It's
Right.
watching
useful-
humanity.
it's
Yeah,
a useful trope to be a systems thinker and imagine yourself not part of the system that you're characterizing.
yeah. You see it from a bird's eye view.
I mean, imagine Copernicus. Here he is sitting at a desk in Poland, and he's imagining that he's up at the pole star looking down on the solar system and picturing it from way outside the system. That ain't easy to do.
Hmm.
A third rock from the sun and a desk in Poland.
Anyone would like to check in before we launch into whatever topics we may have?
Yeah, maybe I should check in a little bit. Yeah, because I was just thinking about. It seems like with all this COVID stuff, and that I feel hello, and Kayla. Yeah, I kind of feel like it's basically the big crisis is in sense making, and it's just become more and more clear to me that that's sort of the most serious issue. I don't even say it's the most urgent issue. Actually, it's sort of the global sense making and ability to reason together about what's happening and share information, the whole ecology of information sharing. It's become very clear that there's some very deep problems there that as long as they exist, it's very difficult to really relate to anything of sort of big global or social questions in any meaningful way, because like almost all of the information is biased, or just let's call it low quality information somehow. So that's been on my mind, and I also think that it's really the only way out of it is some kind of cultural evolution that has to come from the grassroots. And yeah, it's a big project, but small moves in the right direction can definitely help. I also thought that I kind of feel that this space has been much more of a sort of a social space, or sort of social, just talk about different things sort of informally without necessarily going very deep into it. And it's not exactly the thing that it was supposed to be from the beginning, but I still think it has some value just to have some spaces. People just talk together and share presence together. It's, that has a value in itself. But I also think that if some of the global issues are going to be addressed, then it must be a lot more deeper questioning and far deeper digging into the issues than what's been happening so far in these kind of meetings. And by the way, I mean, just this simple tool that there's an automatic transcription to the name, that's actually quite a major improvement. So good technology can help as well. Yeah, anyway, that's just a couple of thoughts were on my mind. So apart from that, I'm having a good start of the year. Done a lot of meditation for me, sitting 1 hour every morning, been trying that. And so it's very, very interesting, just sitting in total silence in the morning and sensing the whole body and really coming into a kind of full presence. So, I mean, I've been experimenting with it for many years, obviously, but trying a much more disciplined approach this year. So that's also been very interesting. Yeah, that's kind of a little bit of what's on my mind.
Speaking of COVID, this won't work for Glenn or Tees because it's only available in the US, but many of the states, including my own local community and the federal government, are now making home COVID tests available for free. And
Next week.
Yeah, here
we
where I
have
live,
them here.
it's already started,
Oh, really?
but only for seniors. And the government's website, which is actually live, doesn't start taking names and addresses until next week. But you can go to covidtests.gov for the federal one, and anybody can go there if you're US. And then the states have their own versions where they're handing them out for free, maybe initially only to seniors. But that's useful because you don't, I mean, all you have to do is give them an address and they'll mail them to you for free. No credit card, no nothing.
How many at a time?
I think they give you a set of four kits from the government, the federal government, and locally they give you one kit, but you got to go pick it up. You have to register to show up at the pickup site. And they had the first one here on Friday morning, which I didn't know about in time. And I have to wait until the next batch becomes available if I want to physically pick up a set locally.
So I know we're already into this, but we did ask for check-in. So if anybody else would still like to check in, do it, or we can just launch right in. You know, I'm actually modifying my moderation style.
Tees had his hand up first, so I think he wanted to ask something.
Yeah, this is my check-in now. Because I'm a teacher, I can ask for a set of 4 self-testing possibilities. So you put something in your nose and so on. So each week before I go teaching, I can test myself. So that's my check-in. We get 4 each time. So if it's, so I can ask and then I get, and not each week. When I ask, I get 4. That's not just when I want.
Cool.
I'll go. 2 quick things. I'll go if that's okay. So
Kayla
2.
also had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Stacy and Kayla. Stacy.
Okay. So just regarding the tests in my town, you can stop there. It's a drive-through, and you get the 2 tests. The town next to me, which is a mile away, through the schools they're doing it. So you just go to the school and you get it. And from what I'm hearing in community groups, it's been really easy. To Glenn's comment, I was surprised to hear you say that that's what you've been thinking about now, because I mean, yeah, I've been thinking, at least for the past few years, I mean, it kind of dictates all my online activities, is that idea that sense making is definitely one of the biggest problems we faced. Without solving that problem, we can't hope to solve any of the others. Yeah, that's my check-in.
Thanks, Stace. Kayla.
Hi, good morning. I was reading that there is a tsunami warning here in California because in the nation of Tonga, there was a volcano eruption. So it just amazes me that all of that activity way out there can impact our coasts over here. So I was reading that. Second thing regarding COVID, last week, my boss had ordered everyone to stay at home and work. And I'm really grateful for that. I mean, not everybody has that opportunity to stay at home and work, especially if the government doesn't mandate it. So it just gives me so much relief to be able to take care of myself and take care of my kids. Kids in the meantime are still going to school, and I feel so bad because it's a small school that we've got, but everybody's very close to each other. And I've talked to the secretary. I mean, the principal had COVID. Several kids have had COVID. Nobody knows, how long they should quarantine. All the testing is just going crazy. And as we spoke, I went ahead and put that 4 free tests up on my Facebook so that anybody who needs to can have it over there. So I myself have had to cancel my in-person classes. So now I have micro classes, which is up to 5 people to be able to take it. But only one person signed up, and now she wants private lessons because nobody else is. And I get it. Everybody wants to be safe. But for now, I'm just kind of going online and trying to make it work. So life is relatively good. I'm blessed. I'm healthy. My kids are healthy so far. And good news too is I'm starting to get into grant making on a federal level too. So I've been reading a lot about child abuse and domestic violence. It's not fun. It really isn't, because it sucks. But it's kind of nice to be able to read it objectively and see the need. And I really hope, speaking to some of the teachers here, that we could kind of, when you're talking about prevention and sense making, Glenn, I heard you say we should just listen to each other. I agree. I mean, a lot of this prevention that I'm reading, they're just like, educate, offer seminars, drown people with paper. Nobody reads that, There's only so much that people can be talked at, So I'm very curious to see if we do receive this grant, how we're going to apply the prevention part of it. So anyways, that's my check-in. I am complete.
So something brief about me. I'm gonna have to go see the dentist. I had a filling fall out last week. So I haven't seen a dentist in 5 years. That's my fault. So now I gotta go find a dentist. But one other thing, hopefully this stands, but some of you remember that I bought the place that I was renting about half a year ago. And at that time, my credit was really bad. So the only mortgage I could actually be eligible for, was a 3.99% loan. And so just 2 nights ago, hopefully this stands, but I just signed refinance papers at 1.75%. So that's actually quite a reduction in the interest rate. So that's going to help me out some. And so I'll be able to buy more cat food for this one right here.
So how many animals do you have there?
7 beating hearts here. Mine, 4 dogs, 2 cats, but I don't know. There may be others.
You really like it there? You think you're gonna stay there for a long time?
Like I said, Glenn, when I got here and I got used to it here, I said, I'd be happy dying here. Yes. Yes. I've never felt that way about any other place before. Except maybe Taiwan. Taiwan might be cool. But at least for a place that I was able to arrange myself and take care of on my own, this is the first place. Although I think my California home might have been that way, but the divorce kind of killed that opportunity. So I'm hoping that all the papers stand, they're all going to be in order, and everything's going to go through. So I'm still crossing my fingers, but at least it's a step forward.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. So would you like to continue on that theme that Glenn brought up and that Barry was elaborating on and others were going to talk about? Or Colin and Josh, you guys want to chime in anytime? And if we run out of things to talk about, I can also throw in a few more things here. And I did not get a haircut.
Oh, Kayla has a topic she wants to bring up.
So I posted something on my site and then also in the GCC site about, and I'll be very honest, I didn't look too much into it about, gosh, let me see if I can find it real quick. It got, about 11 likes, which is kind of cool. And it was, okay. I posted it on January 13, and there's a picture of a Native American man on there. And it says, before our white brothers came to civilize us, we had no jails. Therefore, we had no criminals. We had no locks or keys, and so we had no thieves. If a man was so poor that he had no horse, teepee, or blanket, someone gave him these things. We were too uncivilized to set much value on personal belongings. We wanted to have things only in order to give them away. We had no money, and therefore a man's worth couldn't be measured by it. And I really enjoyed that. And it just kind of tied into capitalism. So, of course, I put, because capitalism is a joke. So I went a little bit into that just to see, how the Native Americans governed. And I thought, gosh, this would be so cool. There was one person, and again, I didn't read any crazy cool books in in like a collegiate space. I looked on Reddit, and somebody had put this really long post about how certain Native Americans were governed, and one of them said that if somebody committed a crime, not only did it impact the person they committed a crime with, but it impacted the community. So it was kind of cool that they looked at it in that sense, because it's true. I mean, it really impacts not only the individual to whom the crime was committed, but the community. So I started thinking about our government, and I started thinking about ways we can improve upon ourselves. Again, I started thinking, going back to the indigenous tribes, of course, when there weren't so many people, and then there wasn't this huge blanket of democracy. How we could utilize those intimate sources to be able to govern our communities and ourselves, and make it sustainable for all of us. So that was just kind of something that I wanted to bring up. But we can certainly talk about what Glenn had proposed. Unfortunately, I came in late, so I didn't hear everything that you said, but I'm fine with whatever.
Did I propose something, or?
No, you brought up the topic of sense making and how important it was to get it right.
Right, yeah.
And Sam, can you put the camera on your face? Because
Eventually.
you might as well just have a picture up.
Eventually. I'd like to add two things to what Kayla was adding. I'm not a great historian or student of history, but my understanding is that the role of the Iroquois and the great nations, the Native Americans, in the framing of the Constitution is actually very underutilized and underreported. If you look at some historical representations by paintings, artists of the time, many of them, or some of them at least, actually have Native Americans in the room with the framers of the Constitution. And yet we never talk about that. But they were instrumental, as my understanding, in introducing certain concepts around how decisions get made, how resources get shared, that sort of thing. And they were actually, part of the framing of the Constitution, but they evidently were not asked to sign. And the story that's told, I guess it's by, the white people there, is that their names are not included. The second thing I'd like to add is, in addition to that meme that you shared, which I enjoyed, there's another one about a Native American asking a church representative, hey, before you came, we didn't have Bibles, we didn't have churches, did that mean that we're going to go to hell? And the church person said no. And then the Native American says, so why did you bring that to us? Similar idea. Anyway, I wanted to add those two elements. And all right, so sort of a meta footnote.
Mhm.
I actually do agree. This thing has, GCC has morphed into a social forum, a kind of a town square. And so I do see that potential collaborations among us form and take their own space and their own thread of activity. I think that's natural. I think that's to be expected. But to expect that this group of non-identified, non-chartered, opt-in, opt-out, actually form a project, I think is impractical. So I no longer hold that as a vision. I actually hold that as people find themselves and they see value in certain things that people are doing, they will naturally gravitate towards each other and set up independent activities. So that is my acknowledgement of what this space has turned into. Over.
Back in the 90s, when I was pioneering online learning communities and other online activities, I had to give it a name, and one of the names that I came up with is the Orenda Project. Does anybody here recognize the word Orenda, O-R-E-N-D-A?
It's the name of the CrossFit place that I used to go to.
Kayla, you know this word, right?
Is it a name of a Native American nation or tribe?
You're close. It's an Iroquois word. And it really is the name of what you were talking about a minute ago, Sam, about these concepts of organization and self-governments. It's a little bit tricky to translate into English. My best translation of Orenda as a governance concept is tribal soul on the right path. Tribal soul on the right path. That's my best attempt at a translation. And so whenever you have an organization, whether it's a tribe or nonprofit, whatever, you want to be on, quote, the right path. That is a constructive, sustainable path. And Orenda is this whole Iroquois or Native American concept of how do you identify and integrate your system so that you're on a path that's going to lead to some kind of success. So that's just the point that the Orenda concept was sort of in circulation when they were organizing the Constitution or the predecessors of the Constitution. That's really what they were drawing upon, the Iroquois concept.
Yep.
By the way, my website for the Orenda project is still on the internet after 20 some years.
Something that comes up for me with this is that this meme that I saw seems to be this is something that can exist on a smaller scale, right? So it's maybe more like a small town or neighborhood, while on a larger scale there's other kinds of systems. You probably need to have like police, jail, etc. Yeah, do you have something about that, Kayla?
Yes, I recognize what you're saying, and of course, back then there was definitely lots less people to govern like that. But I was wondering if, there would be a way to implement democracy with, this mindset. Like, for instance, the Talanoa. I mean, it was used at the COP. I forget which one. And it was also used as a climate presentation here. So there are ways that you can implement some of these things into, a larger scale. I just don't know how. So I thought it would be kind of an interesting topic. And then also there are other tribes and there's other very ancient cultures where a lot of their laws and their rules, were good. And I'd just like to explore if anybody here has, anybody here can historically or know of anything. I don't know what I'm talking about. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah.
There's one key difference in systems that I'm aware of governance or of organizing societies. And I think the key difference is, do you trust the people in it? A lot of the guidance in religions appears to not trust the people that are in those religions. Buddhism, on the other hand, enhances and really relies on the trust of the individuals in themselves and their own ability to make sense of the world. So that's why even Buddha says, don't follow me, follow yourself. But the other, Western religions say, you got to follow this God that I'm here to tell you about. And if you don't, bad things are going to happen to you. The other thing I remember is if you look at Robert Sapolsky, whom I've mentioned before, he's the Stanford biologist who's got this fantastic set of lectures on YouTube. He says that the people who make rules in religions are the ones with OCD. They're the ones that make 600 rules here, 1,000 rules there, how you got to chop certain things, how you got to wear, how you got to stand, how you got to prostrate yourself. They're people who naturally gravitate towards the religiosity. And there's actually biological foundation for that. That's a very fascinating lecture. I actually think that overcomplicates what we really need. It overcomplicates because in all the thousands of years of Taoism, you only need to remember 3 things: patience, compassion, and simplicity. That's enough to build to create a good life and to build a good community. And we like to overcomplicate things by our OCD-ness. Those are, in my opinion, 3 that I've looked at in almost every situation. And in almost every situation, if you were to hold to those 3 foundational notions, that's a good guide through whatever situation you're finding yourself in. Over.
Right. That's like principles for living. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I also wanted to say about this. Well, one thing, this is just a short mention, but I've been listening quite a lot to a scholar in comparative religion called Ravi Ravindra, and he says that one of the characteristic tensions of all the spiritual and religious traditions have been between the people who want to protect a tradition and the people who want to fulfill a tradition. And those are very often in tension. So, for example, in the New Testament, Jesus would be the perfect example of someone who wants to fulfill it's not exactly a tradition. I mean, it's a practice. But while the scholars were the ones who wanted to protect the tradition, so there's a sort of an inherent tension between those. So those who want to fulfill it are often seen as rebels, and they want to often renew the whole thing because it can grow stale. But that's that's a whole topic in itself. But what I wanted to tie this back together with was that if we consider, that meme that Kayla shared and the dialogue form which is described, that seems to be like a recipe for smaller scale community. And I think that's important because that is something that seems to be lacking to a large extent in the large societies today. And I have a hypothesis or belief that the main problems of, what you can call representational democracies or democratic countries, it's very much to do with psychological and social disorder. And if people were more happy, more healthy, and had a healthy community around them, then those mechanisms would work a lot better. Like markets would work a lot better, local and federal governments would work a lot better. I don't think that there would be for example, U.S. Congress, there's no way there could be this hostility between the senators of this group and that group if the people that they represented were really happy people who, lived fulfilled lives. So there is a connection in that sense, that if you can have high quality community on smaller scales, then maybe that will heal also the whole system. So maybe it's not really about system change at a large scale. At least this is an idea. Maybe on a large scale, we have all the systems we need. The problem isn't there. The problem is the psychological health of humans and the lack of real community. And of course, since we mentioned religion, you could also say that religion at its best moments in history have been examples of real community, where people have really supported one another and really shared resources, shared insights, and lift one another up, sort of like one big family. So I think this is an interesting idea, that if one could create better social systems on a smaller scale, it might actually solve also the problems on a larger scale, or at least make them much more manageable. And people would also be open for the big ideas, such as, this we talked about science, real science, as I call it, and sort of free sharing of information, a dynamic knowledge repository on a global scale, and those kinds of things. That also, I think, would be much more likely to happen, and it would work much better if humans in general were in a better state, psychologically, physically, socially, spiritually. So that is the connection that I see between that idea and these big system level ideas.
So Glenn, thanks for that. I actually have, again, 2 rejoinders to that. On your last point about how people would be better if they're in a good mental state, I don't think religions look evil, but if you promote good behavior based on a threat of health, or based on a system of rules based on fear, then that's at the core of the member's mental state. And that's just leveraging the reptilian brain. So that's not taking advantage of the higher limbic or cortex, brain systems. So I actually do want to call out religion, even though it may create what look like seemingly peaceful communities and societies.
I would call that fake religion, what you just described.
Fine.
Fundamental.
That's
Isn't all
fundamentalism.
religion essentially founded on that, though?
No.
All of these prescriptive religions?
That's a misunderstanding of what all the prophets have said, and they've been very clear about it. You have to have
Look at what the churches
connection.
are doing. Look at what
Yes.
the churches are doing, not necessarily what the prophets are saying.
And it has nothing to do with what the prophets started. It has nothing to do with the actual
So Glenn, I
point
actually
of the
listened
whole
to
thing.
you, so I'm hoping to be able to finish. I listened
Please.
to you completely, okay? The other point I wanted to bring up is no one really knows where Jesus went in those missing, what, 12 or 18 years, whatever the duration was, right? But there is emerging, at least, some works that say they have evidence that he actually went to India and got a dose of what they were thinking and doing there and partying there, okay? And then he was able to bring that back and teach a form of it in Christianity. And if you look, as Barry, I'm sure has, there's a lot of parallels between the teachings there and the Buddhist and Hindu teachings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there is
Yeah.
some reason to actually explore that a bit better. So anyway, my point is, yes, just as people bastardize their understanding of science, to just say science is no good, you may be claiming that I'm, bastardizing my notion of religion to say that religion is no good. I completely admit that. But if you look at the practice of it, you have to really understand the effects, the wider effects of it as it's being practiced and as it's being preached and as it's being rammed down certain people, who have to believe what they say and cannot ask certain questions. And that's the true difference between science and religion.
Is
There's a
it
point in religion where you can't ask any more questions, but with science, that's never true.
is it the same thing in science? Scientific method is about asking questions. That's not actually what happens in scientific so-called institutions.
Yeah, but I'm saying that there is a body of knowledge that has been created by science that's actually quite vast and quite well peer-reviewed and quite astoundingly useful and quite enabling for what we've been able to do. I don't view that there's a similar body of knowledge out of religion, and it's not cultivated the same way. It's not grown the same way. Weeds are not extracted the same way. And there's not a series of linkages in epistemology and provenance that actually builds upon this on a solid foundation, because the foundation itself always goes back to what that guy said. And that's not a
Does
solid
it?
foundation.
Does it go back to that? I thought it went back to direct experience and perception and connection with the spirit.
Stacy has her hand up, and so do I.
Okay, I'll stop now, but I'll come back later. Stacy.
Yeah, I just want to take a slight pause in this conversation because I want to ask the question, why have we relegated the well-being of citizens to religious and charitable organizations? And rather than, debate the pros and cons of religion, I would rather put a pin in that and move to the question I just posed, because then, there's time to get to those other questions, but there's a larger one, and that's the one I'm stating now, because I do agree that the well-being of its citizens is going to directly affect the society as a whole.
This actually does tie in with what me and Barry discussed in the chat as well, about how things that start in one direction, a tendency to change direction over time. So if a small group of people begin a practice that is based on contemplation and perception of reality directly, to connect with the spirit within and have certain behavioral protocols between them based on love, compassion, clarity, truth, and so on, it is observed that over longer periods of time, in the name of that, something like the opposite of that appears.
Kayla's hand has been up. She was supposed to be next.
Okay, that was all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Glenn. I would have to agree with Sam as I understand what you're trying to say. And just to clarify it too, for a person's mind, to be healthy, we all, of course, have these, sorry, the dogs are gonna bark right now, but hopefully you can hear me. So we all have our idea of what we think is healthy mentally. And if I'm understanding this, Sam, are you trying to say that some religious groups may see themselves as being healthy on a mental level, but they're not very healthy to society as a whole? And I would have to agree with that, because, you know, where would you put the baseline for your values? You know, based on that, of course, meme, I would like to detract from the value of materialism. I would like to detract from the value of religion as a sense of judgment, you know, and I think it's healthy. You know, it's safe to say that a lot of other people think that that's healthy too. But how would we be able to just kind of, you know, roll that out to a billion, I don't know how many people are on this planet, you know? And is that possible to be able to have that, you know, worldly view? Or do we keep it more of a smaller community governing itself, you know, peacefully? I don't know. That's all I have to say.
When I was studying systems theory at Stanford, I took a course called Operations Research, which is a branch of systems thinking. And operations research is how you come up with the optimal practices for managing an operation, like a business or anything. But it was very mathematical. And one of the things that astonished me is that almost always the optimal practice, when you computed it with rigorous analytical thinking, almost always the optimal practice could not be reduced to a simple set of rules. And I remember there was exactly one problem where you could use rules as the optimal solution. I'll tell you what it is, a very simple one. It's inventory problem. You want to keep some commodity in stock and inventory, and you can keep so much in stock that'll fit in your inventory bin. And the question is, at what point do you order fresh stock to replenish the inventory? And it turns out you wait until it hits a particular threshold, and then you order enough to fill it back up again. And that was the only problem where a very simple rule sufficed. Almost every other case, it was a more complex decision-making process to decide what to do and when to do it. But a lot of problems, when you compute the optimal practice, it's complicated to express, and so they simplify it down to the nearest rule. And in some cases, you can get away with that, but in a lot of cases, when you depart from the optimum to a simplified rule, you run into difficulties because it doesn't behave the way the optimum does. And so whether you're talking about religion, which is trying to take theology and make it down to simple rules, or we're taking government and make it simple laws, as soon as you replace the optimal practice by a rule-based simplification, you run into trouble. And that's predictable. The dynamics of rule-based systems is mathematically computable. And guess what? It's often chaotic.
Not principles, that's different, right? If I follow you right, Barry, that you make a separation between rules and principles.
Right. Exactly.
So rules are sort of either this or that, and it becomes chaotic.
Right.
Because I've heard you talk about this before, but principle is more like driving on the middle of a road.
Exactly.
And trying to not steer too far away from it.
Exactly. Airplanes try to stay on the guideline down the middle of the runway. Automobiles, we put lane lines, which are boundaries. It's much easier to follow a guideline in the middle of the highway, because as you depart from it, it tells you how much to steer to get back to the guideline. If you have boundary lines, lane lines, that's much harder to stay centered in the lane. Mathematically, it's a much harder problem, and you tend to veer, and sometimes you hit the guardrail.
To add on to Barry's point and just give an example, when I was trying,
I got my hand up,
I'm sorry.
but go ahead, go first.
Yeah, it directly relates to Barry, and it's 3 sentences long. Thank you. When I was trying to start a project, I started with one rule, the one rule being only do things you want to do. But what that would have required is to branch off, and that would require a certain level of self-awareness, because you have to know why you decide that you want to do something. And that would have forked into different sets of rules for each individual. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Sam.
This is going to sound soapboxy again.
Soapbox. Ranting.
So in the absence of rules, which I agree are just way too simplified, the model that I prefer to have, at least in my mind, for a society I'd like to live in, is for us to all be able to have enough information about our environment, our world, our actions, our effects, so that we can actually sensibly say, that's where we want to live. Whatever picture of utopia we want to talk about or agree on, where we can have, parties every Friday night, or whether we have, happy kids in schools, or whether we have beautiful forests that we can go walking around. If we can say, this is where I want to live, and then leave it to each of us to say, here's how I'm going to personally help us all get there. This is the path I'm going to take. I'm going to help with recycling, or I'm going to teach kids, or I'm going to help build the next supercomputer, or whatever the heck it is, okay? That allows us to eventually, through Brownian motion, get to where we want to go, which presupposes our ability, Glenn, to sense make that utopian vision, okay? It also presupposes that we have individual autonomy and sovereignty to think well, and then to decide a course of action. It also presupposes that we're all mostly good people, that we're all trying to be good people. And if you leave it to that, obviously there's some corner cases, some people are sick, and we'd have to think about how to take care of society so that we can still take care of the sick people. But that's the basis of a system of society and civilization that I'd like to live in, where we're adapting the way we act with ourselves to say, if this is not working, here's how we're going to change it. That learning mentality has got to be built into society. But before we do that, we got to understand how we actually consume information, how we actually interpret data, how we come up with insights, how we come up with ramifications of our actions and plans. And those need to be meshed together so that when I see what I'm doing is negatively affecting Barry, I can adjust. Likewise, back and forth, okay? That's what we need. That takes a lot of individual creativity, responsibility, investment, focus, planning, discipline, all of that together, but in a good way. Because if you don't do it, there's another system that's going to be imposed on you where all of those freedoms are going to be minimized, if not actually taken away. So I'd prefer to give that power to the people and then co-create that utopian vision. Utopia is a dangerous, sometimes sensitive word, but think of it as the place we want to live, the good place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That's where I want to go. That's where I want to live. Okay. And that's the thing that I would like to see us eventually through our individual and, collaborative projects co-create.
So that's also what I agree with. And since then that we're back to this issue of psychological health and well-being, because I see that as a part of psychological health is the ability to think clearly and have some autonomy and be able to take personal decisions for one's own life, and then the whole system can work. But it doesn't seem that it could work without that. So that has to be fixed first. Would everyone agree with that? That if the situation today is that a lot of people are in a very difficult state psychologically for various reasons, that has to be fixed first before anything can work on a system level. Isn't that pretty clear? You were confused, Sam. Would you agree with that? I think that ties just in with what you said. You're muted, by the way.
Sorry, Glenn. I'm in a meta state right now because I didn't entirely follow what you said. So I find myself looking at the live transcript, trying to understand what you said so that I don't have to ask you, Glenn, what did you say? So there's an interesting new experience going on here in me because the availability of the live transcript is interesting.
Well, I just followed up what you just said because I liked it a lot. And it ties back with this point earlier that seems to presuppose that people are in a somewhat balanced, somewhat healthy state of mind, state of being. And
Yes.
it also presupposes that they have access to basic resources and stuff like that.
Yes.
And it seems that until we fix that, so you could also add, obviously, get rid of extreme poverty, all of that stuff. It's also a requirement.
Yes.
It seems
Yes.
that's the foundation to, to be in a state of being where you can function pretty well, and then all of those opportunities open up.
Yes. Sorry for jumping on that again, but even Buckminster Fuller told us decades ago this is possible. So, the fact that we haven't created it means that we haven't had enough social will to want it. And now we're discovering in the last several years, there's actually people that actually are working against it actively. The people who spread disinformation, the people who erode our trust in truth, the people who erode our trust in ourselves and each other, in favor of these idiots that just want to be loud. There's an active conspiracy against regular people like you and I, you and me. And it's becoming more obvious now. Occupy, I think, was a major step in making sure that became visible. So I do think that if people are not given sufficient means to actually be healthy, to be sustainable, yes, that's difficult. And there are ways to do that. And, we've been in the possession of those means for decades, and yet our social systems prevent us from creating it. And the people to come out and say these things, one example being Bernie Sanders, are actively shoved aside criminally. And that's a sign of the sickness of our US society. Even people like Greta Thunberg, across the world, there are people who are still making fun of her. Those people are going to go down on the wrong side of history. Boom.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that a bit, because I also want to go back to what Kayla said at the very beginning. There's an old joke. What's the greatest single cause of death? The answer is birth. What's the greatest single cause of lawlessness? Laws. And this notion I mentioned before of taking the optimal ethical best practices and simplifying them down to kindergarten level rules. One of the problems that happens is that if I follow the exact rule, I can compute what's going to happen and say, well, that's not really the outcome I want. Let me go back to the ethical best practice, which is different from the rule. So I'm going to depart from the rule and do something that's even better than the rule. But then there are people who are enforcing the rules. And they'll say, Barry, you're not following the rules. And that's against the rules. And this is basically back to what Sam says. If you take somebody who's trying to introduce an ethical improved practice, they're breaking the rules. And they get called out, whistleblown, and punished for doing something better than what the rules tells them to do. That's one of the sicknesses of our culture.
Right.
So it's a part of the problem that you have. There's something like a conspiracy against giving people power. It's a part of the issue that is because of a fear that power will be misused.
Exactly.
That some of
Not misused, actually just used, not misused. They're afraid
Well,
that that power will be used to represent the interests of the people that have actually been suppressed and oppressed by the
right,
powers
right,
that be.
right. So, is the issue that there's a fear that the interests of those people who have been suppressed will be to try to take revenge on the suppressors, kill
Why
them.
do you think there's gerrymandering in election systems? That's exactly why they're gerrymandering. That's a US term. I hope you understand what that means. It's where the lines around election districts are carefully crafted so that the people who draw the lines win.
But yeah, but I think the broad issue is there like a fear from a system level against these revolutionary movements for change because one is concerned that they become violent and destructive because that's happened in the past. And that's one issue. If that's the case, could there be a different kind of social activism which is not violent and is not perceived as violent, but can still be very revolutionary in a different sense, as in revolutionarily creative, for example, create something entirely new, but do it in a way that's very gentle and very elegant, very peaceful. If you ask me, I think the answer is probably yes, but it would require very, very high intelligence. And that's maybe the issue. So, because it's so easy. Yeah, that was it.
Kayla?
Have any of you read that Democracy in America from Alexis de Tocqueville? It's
Tocqueville?
really long, huh?
Alexis de
Yeah.
Tocqueville?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was long and very boring, but I read it. And what was really interesting about it, written back in the day, was he really believed that it was here in the United States was a work in progress towards democracy. But he also pointed out, even back then, that our leaders were poorly educated and open to corruption. So it's a shame too, because I just recently read, if you guys know the Little House on the Prairie books, Laura Ingalls Wilder. Yeah, there is a book that has been published just recently, and it was like the unedited version of her books. And it's quite long and it's quite extensive of the corruption here. And unfortunately, we had these really good rules in place, but people weren't following them. I mean, between the Indians and the settlers, I mean, the settlers were squatting on Indian lands and the government wasn't doing anything about it. And so the history is repeating itself and perpetuating itself. Again, speaking from here in the United States. So, how would we be able to identify that and as a people move on and not let that happen? And I started thinking, when you mentioned Bernie Sanders, I love Bernie Sanders. I don't push him aside. I'm trying to trend Bernie Sanders. I'm trying to trend very intelligent things that people make people think for themselves, and better themselves. And I think educating and trying to get the values, like nice, solid values that are good for everybody, is a good starting point. Using social media and technology is a way to do that. But anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I also like Bernie. Bernie is awesome.
And
So I wanted to respond to you, Glenn, about this avoidance of violence. I think it's curious because there's two ways to look at this. On the one way, if you look at citizenry, To me, it looks like citizens will resort to violence only as a last resort. Nobody wants to stand in the way of a bullet. That's what you do when you feel you got no other options. The problem is on the flip side with government, that's often the first resort.
Exactly.
They take the police and they put you in fear of the police. So there's a difference here. And if the government's first resort is to put tanks in the arms of police and military level weapons in the hands of city police, what does that tell you? In the face of that, if there is an insurrection against the government, it's because the people feel they've had no other option. And all other options will be explored first. And in many cases in history, it's been necessary. It's caused social change. Every country was probably born out of a war. The US certainly was. And we seem to think that the US was a nice place, at least for quite a while. Now I don't think it's, even in the top 30 anymore. So yeah, I mean, I think all of us would love to avoid war, but sometimes it looks like that's the only recourse. Over.
But aren't those also connected? That when the governments are perceived as violent, a resurrection will be more violent. So it's sort of one thing leads to the other. So it's kind of like I was reading about this thing that happened in China, what it's called the Great Leap Forward. It was called, and it was something that Mao did, with enormous reform in how they produced food, and created these enormous collectives, and it sounded like some good ideas, but his leadership was terrible, and the whole thing ended in a total catastrophe.
Millions of people died.
Yes,
And books were burned.
Enormous famine, but a part of what happened there was, as I heard it, that they took land from previously rich landowners, and those landowners were killed, many of them, by people. So it was very violent, and I think there's a fear of that, fear of these revolutionary change movements, that it becomes just something even worse. But there's that. There's also another thing I think it's important to recognize. The idea of scarcity. That's a big one. I wonder if any of these systems could exist as, let's call them systems of oppression of some people, or manipulation. We all know kind of what we're talking about, right? But could those systems exist if most people truly believed that there is an abundance of everything we need for all people in the world? It seems to me that the idea of scarcity is kind of built into the whole structure of this dynamic. And if that idea could collapse, maybe that could open up some of this. So there's a need for new social systems, new communities on a smaller scale, but there also seems to be needs for larger scale systems that can give actual abundance. So then we're into sort of the high tech stuff. Does any of this make sense, by the way?
Yes. So yes to a lot of what you're saying, but if I could just go back to what Kayla was saying and tie it to something that I had put in the chat earlier, which was that it takes a certain level of self-awareness for me to trust somebody, because that goes to Oh, so what I wanted to say is when, we're talking about politicians and leaders, but on an individual level, I would say that what we're talking about power, there is a place in each one of us that has somehow tried to limit the power of someone else, whether that be our pet, our child, and that level of self-awareness needs to be examined on the smaller levels. Because, it goes from the smaller and the larger. And too often we tend to only focus on one direction or the other. And I think both directions have to work towards the middle, the individual development and the development of systems.
Yeah, trust is another big one. I think you are muted.
You're
Oh,
muted,
sorry.
Sam.
I have one more follow-up to you, Glenn, on this whole notion of violence. I have hope, not a lot of hope, but a little bit of hope, that the violence can be tempered if mothers and sisters and daughters get more active and start taking more power.
Mhm.
And start saying, you don't have to do this by fighting. What are you doing? You're standing in the army, you're holding a weapon, and your commander is going to actually have you pointed at the citizenry? Are you fucking crazy? The mothers and daughters and sisters have got to be able to say this. And by the way, I know there are women in the military as well. But by and large, it's male. And I think there's an allegory here, I think, in the story of Electra. Wasn't that the village where women withheld themselves, because they were in protest of what the village was doing? Or was that some other story? Anyway, I do think that the mothers and sisters and daughters, if they were to exert their power and influence, could bring a whole lot of more peaceful thinking to society. This has to happen not just in communities, but in the power structures. So that the mothers and daughters and
That's a
sisters
good
can
point.
say, what the fuck are you doing commanding these people to shoot at the citizens? But the women and daughters and sisters don't feel safe saying that, either that, or they're just enabling. One last point, okay? Well, I forget who was talking about society. I would like to invert society. Instead of product makers making products, guessing at what society needs and putting a random price on it, what if we inverted that model? What if everybody was able to just post, here's what I need. I need 4 ears of corn. I need a few bricks. And then people who actually could do that could say, oh, I've got bricks. Ah, I got corn. And then that actually is, a way that we actually produce an economy. Because then that needs are being met. You can still transfer, some kind of currency through all of that. But, wouldn't that be a way to actually address the needs of people and families and whatever, rather than, you guys hear, rather than the price gouging that's happening? Shkreli, by the way, got fined $64 million. Did you know that? For raising the price up. What?
What do you say?
There's some pharmaceutical CEO, some young, asshole who raised the price of something from what, a very affordable price. Was it EpiPens or was it something else?
Yeah, insulin.
Insulin, from a certain number of dollars to like hundreds of times more expensive.
Pharma boy.
Yeah. Here in the US, I mean, capitalism allows that because, oh, well, he built it, he can price it however he wants, That's
But
the problem.
This is scarcity, right? Here we're seeing it.
Yes. And so he's basically, causing people to die by pricing his medicine out of reach. And he's now been fined 64 or whatever million, but that took a long time. And he's only one case. I'm sure there's others, hundreds, dozens at least, of other such examples. So that's why I would say we'd like to think about a new way that society can work, a new way that the economy can work. Over.
So I agree with the idea that there would be a greater probability of getting the results we wanted if the voices of mothers and daughters were amplified. But I also want to bring it back to what I keep saying, that again, it starts with a certain level of awareness. There are mean girls. There are mothers who, you know, put their finger and talk about the bad kid in the class and try to isolate that kid from the rest of the people. So there has to be a level of self-awareness there. And as far as bringing things into people's awareness, that's something that usually the group in power does not like to start with. And in particular, what happens with women in business, I mean, this is something that I've seen, it's changing now, but it's taking women finding each other and working together, is that when you try to bring forward those feminine values, you get pushed aside further. So some women will leave behind those feminine parts of themselves so that they can become part of the power structure. So I just wanted to point that out. We keep weaving it back to it starts with me. Or you. I'm complete.
Oh, I really like what Sam and Stacy said. For one, when I was looking over some of the material for domestic violence and stuff in education, the first thing that came to mind was, what do these people need so that they don't feel like they need to, you know, destroy their family? So they don't feel like they need to act on their animalistic instincts. You know, I shouldn't even say animals, because animals do that, to cause harm to one another, you know, and sometimes it can be as simple as providing somebody what they need, you know, and eliminating that source of scarcity, like you say, Glenn. So that was what came to mind. So I'm glad that you say that, because sometimes when I come across these mom groups, there will be somebody saying, hey, I'm purging. What do you guys need? And that's just so beautiful. There's another case of another mom. I suppose she's very wealthy. She goes, 4 people here. What are your bills today? And she actually gave the first 4 people who, you know, put their bills online all their money to pay their bills. Wouldn't that be such a beautiful thing? So I love that. I love that notion of society inverting. And then what you said, Stacy, too, yeah. You know, a lot of these women these days that are in power feel like they have to act like a man, you know, and men have their own good strengths, but women have great strengths too. You know, something that I see often when it comes to dating, and I love talking about dating because it's funny, is there was another meme that somebody said, it's just funny how a man will go from hi beautiful to fuck you if they don't get what they want, you know. And I don't know where that comes from. I really don't. And so it would be nice to have women in power to say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you drawing those guns? Why are you saying F you? You know, and there needs to be a lot more awareness of that. And I am complete. Go, Barry.
You know, it's interesting about Pharma Boy and corporatized medicine that nobody can afford. A month ago, if you wanted an at-home COVID test, it was $25 a kit, and good luck finding a pharmacy that had any in stock. And this month, the government's giving it away for free. Just go to a website and sign up for it. There's a name for that, by the way. It's called socialized medicine. Look how we went into socialized medicine just like that. Not a peep out of any congressman wanting to vote for or against socialized medicine. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I also just want to add, before it went to $25, it was at 15. So it went from 15 to 25, back down to 15, then to free.
So we can have socialized medicine if people think it's important enough to maintain the health of our public systems.
So Barry,
Yeah.
the availability of vaccines at a national level, I believe that was an executive branch action, right? That was not a congressional action.
Correct.
So
And
that's
and
how
they
you
fought
do it,
over it.
is if you give one person the authority to make, an action in the face of emergency, it can be done well. It can also be abused. In
Absolutely.
this case, it was done well.
Ethical best practices. The key word is ethical, but not everybody in government is ethical.
Because, by the way, the economy says everybody is selfish. That's how the economy is presumed to be.
Right.
What do you think you're going to create when you build that in as an assumption?
Right.
Stupid.
Look at Salk and Sabin. They didn't patent their medicine to make money. They gave it away for free. The purpose of the patents was to make it available for everybody at minimum cost.
Yes.
That was ethical.
Wouldn't it be great to have people to still think like that?
Yeah, it would be fabulous.
It's
Welcome,
cool to
Heiner.
get a- Hey, Heiner. Just briefly, it's clear to me everything you say, what you're describing as a vision is an example of a post-scarcity economy or abundance economy. I think we might underestimate just how deeply embedded into our thinking this idea of scarcity is. I mean, the whole system would maybe just almost disappear if we really could think like that. We could just give things away for free, give people what they need. There's enough. It's a whole other way of thinking from your classical economic thinking. So there's some kind of paradigm shift that has to happen in thinking here. Of course, this is something many people want. Yeah.
It seems that the supposition behind the Constitution was that people would still have some reasonable sense of values and ethics. And that was intended to balance what was possible with power. The problem with that is if you couple that with capitalism, well, capitalism says you succeed when you amass currency, and then people who have $100 envy people who have 1,000, and then you make that recur. Those pressures will hit the government. So all of a sudden now, do you value more dollars or do you value doing the right thing? It doesn't matter what point in time you look at. The longer you go, the more that pressure builds up. We've just hit that breaking point. So Congress people, political parties, they're bought now. They're purchased. They should have stickers on them, brands. And we know this. Bribery is called lobbying. That's why we avoid calling it bribery. What a farce.
Yeah, that's
We
corruption.
need to bring, that's why I think transparency and resumption of some kind of real education is necessary. And that's why there's been a systemic move over decades to make people dumber. You destroy the education system, you provide no new innovation in education for decades, you grade people on schedule, not by learning. It's systematic.
And it's also a result of scarcity. Again, we see it. Why is it that people are speaking about the scientific method? It's so beautiful, and yet the scientific institutions, they're not sharing data that's trackable right back to the source. That's
Actually,
another
mostly
example.
Actually, mostly they are.
Well, I would disagree. I think they should do far, far better.
It's the private institutions that may not be, but the public institutions, especially public and funded research, that's mostly available.
And that's good. That's great. That's what we should build on. It's like high quality education. It's information. right? But why do we have the notion of ownership of information? Okay, maybe that's a good question.
It's a
Does-
capitalist notion. I was
Yes,
flabbergasted
exactly.
when
It
I
is.
came
It
across
is.
that.
Would that notion even exist in the society that we're describing? Would there be any notion of owning an idea? I don't think so. I think it would be much easier to live in a world where every idea was owned by everyone. There was no copyright, no ownership of ideas, none of this stuff. And for example, groups like these, when we share ideas, if we didn't have that notion in the back of our minds of ownership of ideas, it would probably be much more natural for us to just build and build and build on one another's ideas instead of there's this subconscious thing trying to promote my idea. So this is also tied to this. So it goes really deep, this whole notion of scarcity and ownership. It seems to go through all of human culture.
Stacy's got her hand up, but Stacy, I'm going to take 2 sentences, okay? What do you think about ownership? Because you're questioning ownership
Yes,
at its
Yeah.
basic level, okay?
definitely.
But
Yeah.
it extends to things like IP. Okay, Stacy.
Yeah, it's really hard to remember what I wanted to say, but I wanted to pull something out of what you had said and make a point that when you were talking about why you wouldn't do the right thing, like why it becomes less likely to do the right thing. I want to point out that in a large system, doing the right thing doesn't get seen. In a smaller system, doing the right thing has more visibility, therefore value. And so does doing the wrong thing.
Maybe.
Mm.
But you know,
Maybe.
that's why certain decisions and certain political offices, they're actually, you know, more or less transparent.
Yep.
Some political offices will publish a calendar, for example, of the officials in power.
Yeah, I want to push back on your maybe for a minute, because in a larger system, nobody would have been able to recognize that me wanting to bring up this question of the difference of how things happen in a larger system versus a smaller system, it would have never made it to the top. But because we're in a room with only 9 people, there was a way to force that idea through.
So why shouldn't it be able to rise to the top in a larger system? That should be possible, shouldn't it? That the good, really good deeds.
Should? Should?
Doesn't seem to be anything preventing it inherently, that good deeds and good inventions and ideas can rise all the way overnight, all over the world, viral.
Sam,
What?
here's your reminder.
Glenn, I don't disagree with you. I think the point I'm trying to make is that it has to start on the smaller system first.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Narratives can get away with murder, and math can't even get an audience. Sam?
This is going to sound oblique, but I am finding that YouTube is a phenomenal resource for education.
Yep.
Granted, there's a lot of crap there, okay?
Yeah.
But it's phenomenal if you really want to learn something.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff that I'm getting up to speed on with my closure programming, 99% of it is on YouTube, literally. So imagine if we're trying to teach a course on arithmetic, and anybody, any streamer, any entertainer, any teacher, anybody could say, here's arithmetic. And kindergartners could go and say, I like that one. I'm going to watch that one. And they could just take their time and really learn arithmetic without a schedule, without saying you got to take this test at 3 o'clock, tomorrow. And if that's how we structured education, to say, okay, here's 68 things I want you to learn in first grade. Go at it. Find the right places. And if you want hints, here's a few. Start here. Imagine that as an educational model. And if you need personal attention, we augment that with some personal teaching, obviously, right? You can't do it all online. But imagine that as a foundation. YouTube is phenomenally useful.
It's fantastic you mentioned that, because that actually is a model that we're already seeing work. I totally experienced the same thing.
Right. I'm saying let's systematize it. Okay.
YouTube's doing something right. YouTube's great. Really is.
I don't think it's because of YouTube. It's because of the content creators. They're helping people monetize crap. Okay, that's what YouTube is doing. So they're not really helping education. They're helping entertainment. There's a difference.
For me, they're helping education.
Yeah, for me as well. But you notice that their business model is around engagement and clicks. So that's more entertainment and not necessarily education, in my view.
Well, there's one thing we should mention. YouTube has done something Facebook has not done. They have an ad-free service, YouTube Premium.
Which you pay for.
Yes, I pay for it with pleasure. It's $14 a month, and it's totally worth it.
Okay. Kayla, Stacy?
Actually, Stacy had her hand first, so go ahead.
Thank you. I didn't know which method we were using. I just wanted to add to Sam. I mean, that's something that I've thought about for a long time in terms of changing education, where you would use the curated YouTube videos, and rather than teachers, you would have facilitators who also have almost like part social worker, part community link, just changing the whole system. And it would create a lot of jobs for recent college grads who have that heart-centered focus in the work they want to do. So I'm right there with you on that. Thank you, Kayla.
Oh, no problem. My dogs agree. So a fantasy of mine just recently, yeah, they want to talk about the fantasy of mine because I've had a fantasy about education, believe it or not. Because there have been short on teachers, I was like, oh, too bad I don't have enough credits to teach. Fantasy of mine would be to go into class and just be like, hey, what do you guys want to learn? And then go on to YouTube and just say, as long as it's educational, as long as we could talk about learning something, what do you guys want to learn? What do you guys want to talk about? And I think that's what makes YouTube so popular, is because we can actually go in there and type what we want to learn. I could look at all the best Tahitian dancers on there and be like, man, and it's super exciting. So anyways, I just wanted to add that, my fantasy.
It's almost a reality, isn't it?
That was the operating principle of the online learning community that I started up back in the 1990s. It didn't have a syllabus. Every day, everybody's ready to learn something. What are you ready to learn today? Let's learn that. And that was the principle. Everybody announced or revealed somehow what they wanted to learn, and then we enabled them, empowered them to learn what that was. And the learning went through the roof.
And a good teacher could then tie it back to the foundational things like, arithmetic, biology.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Some of the teachers who observed their students learning on microdisc were just blown away at how much important they were learning reading and writing and spelling and grammar, because it was all text in those days. And that was the medium. And if they didn't spell and type sentences, then they weren't participating. And those basic reading skills just skyrocketed. Sam.
I've made reference to that my older two kids went to a middle school that was run by followers of, what is it, Paramamsa Yogananda. It's called the Living Wisdom School. And every year, the entire student body population, which is 50 kids, okay, through K through 8, okay, all 50 kids, K through 8, would basically be given a year-long project, which was maybe not a year-long project, but it was a very long project. It was a play, okay? And the play would be centered around an important historical figure, like Jesus, like Buddha, like MLK, like Hafiz, like Rumi, you know, any of those, Kuan Yin, for example. So every year, they would build their historical studies, their reading exercises, their math, their biology, their science in the era or in the, you know, context of that single figure. The kids, I think, got a lot out of it. And then at the end, the play happens and all the parents get to see, and all the themes were connected together. I thought that was a pretty interesting approach. I'm still appreciative of that particular school.
Yeah, I have to leave soon, but just I want to add one little meta note to I think there's many good ideas to come here, and it's an idea we've just seen an expression of, and I think that this would also be very useful for the transition that's needed, and that's to highlight some of the things that we have done that have actually worked, very well. And I think that YouTube is an amazing example of a very, very positive thing that's happened, and that's actually working pretty darn well, especially if you can use it consciously. A lot of fantastic music you can listen to as well. I want to tell this story. You know, a couple of times a year, I meet my two half brothers, and we just sit together. We have a long weekend together, and in the evening we're just sitting together, watching YouTube videos of beautiful music, and it's got a really nice sound system, and it's just a fantastic way to spend an evening. Each of us just pick one song, then the other one picks a song, and we all just sit there and listen to a glass of wine and stuff like that. And yeah, it's an amazing thing to do, and it's because of this free sharing of great stuff. You can find everything in one place. So yeah, we do have some things that we have done very well, human beings. That's encouraging to keep in mind. Anyway, yeah, I'm logging off. Good to see you guys.
The best series on YouTube is the PBS digital series called Crash Courses. They've got dozens of crash courses in practically every imaginable subject with different hosts. They have about a dozen different hosts. My favorite host on PBS digital Crash Courses is Hank Green. He covered some of the topics that I was most interested in. And I said to him, because he's on Facebook, I said, Hank Green is the person I would most like to be if I were him.
I just wanted to share a educational memory that I had. One of the teachers that I loved the most was my 6th grade teacher, and a lot of our students had felt the same way about this particular 6th grade teacher. He actually gave us a project that took a year long, and it was build your own solar system. And what he did is he tied it into how solar systems are made, tied it into photosynthesis. How's your planet going to be, pH balanced? What are your plants going to look like? Animals, tied it into animals. And it's really cool when you can actually create yourself the world that you want and envision. I had a lot of pink flowers, and I had a purple sky, a very, very feminine world. And it just kind of ties into what you were saying, Sam. If we can build our own community and our own utopia, and then just go there, yeah, it might be a beautiful thing. And kind of if we can hone down our values, what's valuable to us, how can we, um, honor what we want as an individual and as a community. So, anyways.
And your background music was Purple Rain.
Yeah, exactly. I had Purple Rain. Now, I don't know what kind of rain I had, but I'll never, ever, ever forget that project. We had a nice thick book at the very end of what our planet looked like, from start to finish. And
You still have it?
no, I don't keep things. I don't even keep things of me dancing. I have these like awesome pictures that I want to post because those were my better looking years, and I never kept it. So
So
So-
just getting,
Go ahead, Stacy.
yeah, I just wanted to add with the whole idea of using the YouTubes and the individual learning that it's also necessary to then bring those together because we still need the connection and the community. So it's sort of like gathering around, joint interests.
Yep. Another effect of working towards that utopian world that each of us wants to create is most of us would like to see our friends there.
Yes.
People would care about. That's an opportunity to co-create that.
it's too bad that the education system is so blocked. I was talking to on Tuesday. I have a regular meeting with Jean Paul, me and a couple of other people to talk about sustainability. And I was asking them, I'm like, have you ever had any methods that were successful, in your community to be able to introduce these to school? Because that would make a huge impact with sustainability. And John Paul was like, I tried, it's his hands, the school's hands are tied because they're just so blocked, and it's a shame because not every child has the capacity to sit somewhere, be talked at, and be given a ton of paperwork, that has very little to do with when they grow up and actually have a career. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of project-based learning, both in the classroom environment and online. And we did a lot of project-based learning, just like what Kayla was talking about on micromuse. The kids would pick some scene either from history or from some subject, and they would recreate a model of that scene. And then everybody would visit everybody else's little model, and they were interactive. They were a lot of fun, and the kids loved it.
John Paul was saying that like in a university-based or kind of higher level education, that he was able to get in touch with, and have certain programs, but from elementary, he said it was very difficult. And it is very difficult here. I mean, when I try to pose kind of when the kids were distance learning and my son, who's extremely smart, was failing because he was so bored, I tried to ask the teacher if she, had other ideas to introduce to the class to be able to, connect, maybe do something fun, go around the world. I don't know. There's all kinds of cool resources, but she looked at me like it was crazy. So, it's a shame because it does kind of start there, and not too many people have that flexibility or even agree with what I was saying. People look at me like I'm crazy. Go ahead, Sam.
It wasn't attention deficit disorder. It was boredom surfeit syndrome.
So I'm actually wondering, inspired by Stacy's question about starting with us, if we had such educational resources in YouTube, like PBS Digital, and we took a kid, okay, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, okay, and said, here's what you could learn. pick 1, 2, 500 things, go at it, take a year. Would kids actually do that? What would we need to do in society to make that fun and attractive and appealing to these kids at those age levels?
One, make it interactive. Creative and interactive are two essential ingredients.
And by being creative and interactive, it ties into what I was going to say is there has to be opportunities for connection because like you said, we want to have our friends there.
Exactly. Interactive with other peers. And with some role models, some adult role models too.
There's probably some people in Meta thinking this.
Sean, yeah, one or two.
Is when you say in Meta, are you referring to a special group?
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook's new name.
Oh, overall Facebook. Okay.
No, they
thought you
actually
meant- I
bought a
thought you-
company doing virtual reality, and that is the larger vision. And so they actually have people working on facial goggles that immerse you into a digital virtual reality. And in fact, I would predict within a year or two, we could be having rooms, discussions here in virtual reality. I would probably propose that at some point. Right now, they cost $400. So not all of us can afford a $400 headset to do this.
And also rendering scenes is a lot more work than writing 1 or 2 sentences that merely describes in a narrative what the scene is. It's a lot cheaper to write a
Yeah,
paragraph
Josh has already got
Josh,
one, see.
than to make it.
Josh, is that 128 or a 256 one?
256.
Yeah, that's the $400 model. I'm about to order one myself.
See, I have to tell you, I will not be wearing, well, if I can't see your eyes, I really am not going to spend too much time talking to you.
Oh, Josh, you've got eyes? Really? You're in your omni world, I know.
See, I have to get corrective lenses for that too when I buy it.
But I have a question to Josh, because I know Lauren Mignon through you, and I haven't seen her since long. Has any one of you contact with her?
I spoke to her yesterday.
She's fine?
She's fine. Yeah.
But she's...
Her husband is in the process of starting a new business and she's just, taking time to be with her family and she'll be on the scene again.
Is she still in France?
No, she's in Minnesota right now.
Oh,
Well, I was just worried because some people we are like in family very close after years somehow suddenly drop out, like it was with Tammy until I visited her. And so it was very strange for me to learn that she is with her kids now at her parents' place. And so I worried a lot. But now it looks like she's still maintaining contact. So
Yeah.
that is great.
speaking of which, has anyone interacted with Just Winder?
He was in an unblocking a couple of months ago.
Yeah, for a couple of sessions.
Yeah, it was funny. So nope.
Veni Vidi Voci. I came, I saw, I left.
Getting towards the top of the hour. Anybody feel like a checkout?
I would like to talk in one of the future sessions of what I'm in now. Most of you know Open Space, Harrison Owen, who created open space technologies in the 80s. And we met him in the 90s. And they're now using Zoom and Chicochat and a Miro board to really make dynamic self-organization group meetings. So not boring ones, linear with a linear chat, but you dynamically use the law of the 2 feet as bumblebee and butterfly and move to what you want to talk about. I find it very, very efficient, and I'm presently in such a session in parallel. I want to talk with you about how we go beyond this linear chats so we can really navigate and answer like in a conversation or negotiation chat, answer to specific topics raised in the discussion maybe a day or a month earlier, and how we use more advanced technologies to really focus and structure our Zoom conversations. Only
Heiner, would you like
for
would
another
you like
time.
next Saturday, the 22nd? Would you like to take that Saturday?
You're muted, Heiner.
Muted, Heiner.
I'm very sure I'm booked that time, because there we do global agoras, 50 years problematic discussions, how to really go beyond voting to really going to the deep root causes and drivers. So that 22nd is not fine with me. The week after I have to check.
Okay, I'll pencil you in for the 29th. You tell me yes or no.
Well, I will give you a note. And anyway, I love to pop in here, but we are so distracted nowadays, and it's going to be worse.
You
So
mean
we
you're not
really
100%
have to
present, Heiner?
find windows that we come to a smart quality of conversation, not this hours and hours and hours of family gatherings only.
I'll check out. Thank you very much. I had something to say, but it just kind of left me. Yeah, my dog is going crazy. So bye. Thank you.
I'll go next. It's funny that Heiner mentioned both Lauren and Miro, because I've just realized, like, it might surprise you, Sam, to know that I actually went on and tried to figure out how to use it, because I recognize that I need to use the board to be able to show a basic, simple starting point for whatever it is I want to do.
Yep. Share it.
I didn't do it yet. She's going to help me.
I'll go next. At 4 o'clock today, which is in approximately 6 hours, my extended family of somewhere around 20 or 30 people have scheduled a session for me to introduce Tai Chi to them. This is on my dad's side. So every Saturday at 4 o'clock, we have a family gathering, and it's usually all the people in the US plus a handful from Taiwan and Japan. And we've actually been doing this for over a year now. And so it used to be just random conversations, but lately, one of my cousins, Lisa, has actually asked people to schedule certain topics on certain days. And today, they're asking me to introduce Tai Chi. So I'll be doing that today.
Are you going to tape it?
I'll ask them to tape it, yeah.
Yeah, if you tape it, I would like to see it.
I used to do this, yeah, thanks. Sorry, I used to walk my daughter to school, which was a quarter mile away. And between the school and our house was a very nice park. In fact, that park was one of the biggest reasons I bought a place in Saratoga, a long time ago. So I would walk her to school, and on the way back, I would stop at the park for about 45 to 50 minutes, do my warm-ups, do my Tai Chi. And occasionally, and I did this for like, 10, 15 years. I didn't walk her to school, those many years, but, in those years, I did walk her, and I did exercise in that park a lot. So obviously some people would come by and say, hey, what are you doing? They would talk. I would say, hey, yeah, if you want to, I can introduce something to you. And some people stuck around for just 1 or 2 sessions, and some people stuck around for 6 months. So I enjoyed meeting people who were interested in seeing Tai Chi at the park and then stopping to chat. So I kind of enjoy sharing Tai Chi.
I love having, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Kayla's gone now, but just a word of advice. In a crowded room, when you're doing your Tai Chi, be careful not to smack one of your children in the face with the back of your hand.
Oh, I'll be happy to say I've never done that.
Did you see Kayla's video when she did that to Maxwell?
No, I didn't see it.
That's the reference. She was video recording a dance, and Maxwell walked into the back of her hand as she was gesturing. Sorry, go ahead, Stacy.
No, I was just going to say that I like the idea of having a recording because I've had somebody try to teach me and I enjoyed it. But what happened is they got too attached to what I would do, how much I would practice after the fact. And I didn't want to be beholden to anybody.
And just for the record, no, you cannot learn Tai Chi in a video session, okay? You can learn aspects of it, but you can't really learn Tai Chi that way.
I meant in an ongoing thing. I mean, I assume this is an introductory, but I'm saying sort of the learn at your own pace. Like maybe I just want to take 2 or 3 of the exercises and stay there for as long as I want to.
Yep. Josh, you had your hand up?
I was just going to share with you, Stacy, my Tai Chi teacher would have a t-shirt that said practice, 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 practice in every language. And I think the teachers really want you to practice so they can teach you more stuff. So they're like, please learn that so I can teach you more. So that's why they want you to practice so much. I don't think it was, them trying to force anything on you.
Oh,
I could be wrong.
Honestly,
I don't know the teacher.
Honestly, I don't care what the reason was. I just didn't like, I don't want it.
I had a Tai Chi teacher in San Francisco one time who said, essentially, he taught so many decades that he could ask people to just do the first move, the raising and lowering of the hands, and he'd already know whether that person actually, knew how to do Tai Chi or not. Actually, you can just, see it when people walk also.
Hey, Colin, you want to say hello and goodbye? You already said goodbye?
You can't see his eyes to tell if he's actually paying attention.
I think that's a no.
Yeah.
Sam, I
I'll
gave
leave
you a
the
link.
session open if you guys like.
Nah, I have to leave. I have to get ready.
I gave you a link, Sam, to that video with Kayla smacking.
Oh, okay.
Like a blooper? Is that for the GCC bloopers reel?
I think it touched the funny bone of Barry.
No, I don't have anything to add. Just good to hear the people around the world. Nice to see us all.
Thanks for saying hi, Colin.
Yes, I was just away from the mic for a second, but I was listening.
Actually, other than Kayla, does anybody else here? Oh, sorry, Kayla and Josh. Does anybody else here actually still have kids at home? Huh, interesting. Because mine just left this year.
Yeah, I just sent mine out of the house too. I told her to get a job. She's starting to learn to talk.
Probably coming back later.
I hope not. I hope she does well on the internet. I don't know. We'll see.
This is my first full year of not living with a child.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Well,
well,
here's to a
bye,
good
everybody.
2022 for everybody. Okay.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Tice. Good to see you.